Hello students, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ritesh Budden, and in this video I am going to share with you a short summary of the chapter Environment and Natural Resources from your textbook in Political Science class 12th, Contemporary World Politics. Kindly watch this video till the end, and if you are new on my channel, please subscribe. Thank you so much if you have already done it. So let's start. This chapter examines the growing significance of environmental as well as resource issues in world politics. It analyzes in a comparative perspective some of the important environmental movements against the backdrop of the rising profile of environmentalism from the 1960s onwards. Notions of common property resources and the global commons too are assessed. We also discuss in brief the stand taken by India in more recent environmental debates. Next follows a brief account of the geopolitics of resource competition. We conclude by taking note of the indigenous people's voices and concerns from the margins of contemporary world politics. Now let us enter into the first topic, environmental concerns in global politics. There have been many environmental issues that are concerns of the global politics. Number one, there is a decline in the availability of cultivable land, and a substantial portion of existing agricultural land is losing fertility. Number two, around 1.2 billion people in developing countries have no access to safe water, and 2.6 billion have no access to sanitation according to the Human Development Report 2006. Number three, the loss of biodiversity continues due to destruction of habitat in areas which are rich in species. The act of deforestation takes place for personal gains, removing the natural inhabitants. Number four, another danger to ecosystems and human health is a steady decline in the total amount of ozone in the Earth's stratosphere. Number five, even the coastal waters are becoming increasingly polluted due to land-based activities. You might ask, are we not talking here about natural phenomena that should be studied in geography rather than in political science? But think about it again. If the various governments take steps to check environmental degradation of the kind mentioned above, these issues will have political consequences in that sense. Most of them are such that no single government can address them fully. The environmental consequences of economic growth acquired an increasingly political character from the 1960s onwards. International agencies like the United Nations Environment Programme (UNEP) started holding international conferences to deal with environment issues. Earth Summit or Rio Summit was held in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil in June 1992, which produced conventions dealing with climate change, biodiversity, forestry, and recommended a list of development practices called Agenda 21. Now, what do we mean by Agenda 21? Agenda 21 is a non-binding action plan of the United Nations with regard to sustainable development. It is a product of the Earth Summit held in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil in 1992. The protection of global commons, the next topic. Commons are the resources shared by the community as a whole, not individually. In the world, there are some areas which are located outside the sovereign jurisdiction of any one state and hence require common governance by the international community. This is known as what? Global commons. Global commons. They include Earth's atmosphere, Antarctica, the ocean floor, and outer space. A number of agreements were signed which include the Antarctic Treaty of 1955, the Montreal Protocol of 1987, and the Antarctic Environmental Protocol of 1991. And now let's see what is Antarctic Treaty. Antarctic Treaty. The Antarctic Treaty and related agreements, collectively known as the Antarctic Treaty System, regulate international relations with respect to Antarctica, Earth's only continent without a native human population. Now, what is Montreal Protocol? Please note it down. The Montreal Protocol is an international treaty designed to protect the ozone layer by phasing out the production of numerous substances that are responsible for ozone depletion. It was agreed on 16 September 1987 and entered into force on 1st January 1989. And now, what is Antarctic Environmental Protocol? Note it down. The Protocol on Environmental Protection to the Antarctic Treaty, also known as the Antarctic Environmental Protocol or the Madrid Protocol, is part of the Antarctic Treaty System. It provides for comprehensive protection of the Antarctic environment and dependent and associated ecosystems. The history of outer space as global commons shows that the management of these areas is thoroughly influenced by north-south inequalities. And now let's move to the next topic: common but differentiated responsibilities. There were differences between the countries of the north and south over environmental issues. The northern countries want everyone to be equally responsible for ecological conservation. The developing countries of the south believe that the ecological degradation is the product of industrial development undertaken by the developed countries. In the Rio Summit 1992, it was accepted that special needs of the developing countries must be taken into account in the development and interpretation of rules of international environmental law. The 1992 United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, also provides that the parties should act on the basis of equity. It was accepted that a large amount of greenhouse gas emission has originated in developed countries, and per capita emissions in developing countries are relatively low. Developing countries like India and China were exempted from the requirements of the Kyoto Protocol. The Kyoto Protocol is an international agreement setting targets for industrialized countries to cut their greenhouse gas emissions. Now the next topic starts: common property resources. It represents common property for the group, but with the rule that members of the group have both rights and duties with respect to the nature, levels of use of a given resource. But issues like privatization, agricultural intensification, population growth, and ecosystem degradation have caused common property to dwindle in size. Next topic: India's stand on environmental issues. India has signed and ratified Kyoto Protocol 1997 in August 2002. Developing countries like India and China were exempted from the requirements of the Kyoto Protocol, as I've already told you. At the G8 meeting in June 2005, India pointed out that the per capita emission rates of the developing countries are a tiny fraction of those in the developed world. The Indian government is already participating in global efforts through a number of programs like Energy Conservation Act 2011, Electricity Act of 2003, and so on. In 1997, a review of the implementation of the agreements at the Earth Summit in Rio was undertaken by India. India suggested that the developing countries must get financial resources and clean technologies from the developed countries in order to meet UNFCCC commitments. Now the next topic, environmental movements. Some of the most significant responses to the challenge of environmental degradation have come from groups of environmentally conscious volunteers working in different parts of the world. The forest movements of the South in Mexico, Chile, Brazil, Malaysia, Indonesia, continental Africa and India are faced with enormous pressures regarding forest clearing. Another example of the group which is working against mineral extraction company as it leads to displacement of communities, etc. Another groups of movements are those involved in struggles against mega dams. In India, Narmada Bachao Andolan is one of the best known of these movements. I hope you remember it well. The next topic, resource geopolitics. Resource geopolitics means who gets what, when, where and how. Throughout the Cold War, the industrialized countries of the North adopted a number of methods to ensure a steady flow of resources. Oil countries to be the most important resource in global strategy. The immense wealth associated with oil generates political struggles to control it. West Asia, specifically the Gulf region, accounts for about 30% of global oil production. Another important resource relevant to global politics is water. Regional variations and scarcity of fresh water in some parts of the world is a leading source of conflicts in the 21st century. A number of studies show that countries that share rivers, and many countries do share rivers, are involved in military conflicts with each other. The next topic, the indigenous people and their rights. The UN defines indigenous population as comprising the descendants of peoples who inhabited the present territory of a country at the time when persons of a different culture or ethnic origin arrived there from other parts of the world and overcame them. Indigenous people today live more in conformity with their particular social, economic and cultural customs and traditions than the institutions of the country of which they now form a part. The areas occupied by indigenous people include Central and South America, Africa, India and Southeast Asia. The indigenous people appeal to governments to come to terms with the continuing existence of indigenous nations as enduring communities with an identity of their own. In India, indigenous people applies to the scheduled tribes who constitute nearly 8% of the population of the country. In fact, they have paid a huge cost for development since they are the single largest group among the people displaced by various developmental projects since independence. Issues related to the rights of the indigenous communities have been neglected in domestic and international politics for very long. During the 1970s, growing international contacts among indigenous leaders from around the world aroused a sense of common concern and shared experiences. The World Council of Indigenous Peoples was formed in 1975. The council became subsequently the first of 11 indigenous NGOs to receive consultative status in the UN. This is the end of this video. I hope it was useful. If yes, please like and share this video with your companions. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next video.